Hi there and welcome to the Labyrinth. Today we're looking at part 5 of this series, which is the final series on arrows on the birth chart. So once again, if you're a returning visitor, I'm so glad that you've hung in there. If you're a newbie, please do read the other view the other videos before you conclude this, because arrows on the birth chart is actually a form of numerology that some people call tic-tac-toe. Either way, it's just part of what numerology can teach us and show us about ourselves and also about our children and our family members. It's a really good tool for helping to identify our life purpose or our destination, if you like. Some people call it the blueprint for life, things like that. But either way, just to reiterate, what we've got here in this video is just a very small part of the entire process and the blessings that numerology can give to us. So I say thank you, well done for sticking in for this long. I'm going to crack straight on into it today because, of course, once we've got this done, then we can start on I think it's probably the final part of the series, actually, the numerology course. So as an overview, just a reminder, these are all the arrows that we've looked at and discussed on the different videos. You can see that we've got series 8.1 to series 8.5. And if there's a number on there, if you haven't actually watched any of the other videos, if there's an arrow there that you think, that sounds interesting, you can see very quickly at a glance which of the videos you need to go to. And it will be on the numerology playlist, of course. And you can just type in those numbers there, like S1E8.5, and that will pull you up the specific video that you're interested in. Now, of course, today we're going to be looking at the arrows of spirituality, emotional balance, and practicality. So the arrow of spirituality is a really interesting arrow. We can see here it's got the 3, 5, and 7. People that are born with those numbers, they're going to have this arrow of spirituality. And I think I don't know about you, but when I think of the arrow of spirituality, unless I actually explore it, I sort of think of somebody who's a little bit holier than thou or whatever, where realistically, if we look at Elizabeth R. being one of the few people that I could find that actually had the arrow of spirituality, she certainly was no saint, and she hasn't gone down in history as being a saint. But the reality too is that she didn't just have the arrow of spirituality, she also had an arrow of determination. Now, I want to make the point with her, if we're saying, okay, there's a person that's got the arrow of spirituality, she made some hardcore decisions. They were not always kind. From where we sit, but at the same time, I don't know about other people, but I have questioned the fact that she chose to live her life as a single woman rather than marry and have children. And I don't know about other people, but I've questioned whether or not she had intimate and romantic liaisons outside of the marriage. And until I was doing this particular activity, I sort of thought that it was probably a bit deceptive. But now I remember there was some saying that she said where she doesn't need a marriage, she's married to England. I think more to the point, she wasn't just married to England. She, in her own mind, would have been the early equivalent of perhaps a nun, where she has chosen to marry God, if you like, by another word, and to lead the English people or the British people. And she does fulfill a lot of the criteria for how a person gets the arrow of spirituality. And with this, we're talking about, with the number 3, you've got the number of understanding. It's a mind playing thing. When you're talking about 5, we're talking about a level of compassion. And when we're talking about 7, we're talking about this philosophical expansiveness, this practical oneness, the connection between one person to another. And what we see when we've got a 3, 5, and 7 is the integration, the connection. It's a powerful combination with a potential of a very, very deep spiritual awareness, which is put into practice in daily living. So basically, the arrow encourages growth via personal experience. Okay, people with this arrow, they tend to learn from their own experience. They definitely don't take advice from others, and their preference is to this personal experience as opposed to learning from a book. So I can see why she might have rebelled a bit. Perhaps if somebody pushed a Bible at her telling her this is right or wrong, she might actually buck at that, because to her, her moral compass lay within, I would imagine. Anyway, if you have a child, actually, before I talk about having a child, I'm going to talk about the way they develop. Right, in their early lives, what happens with a person with an arrow of spirituality? They often experience really deep sadness, and this is how they build their strength and their resilience, and it deepens their philosophical understanding of people and life, because this is how we learn. We all learn how to assess and judge a character, shall we say, from being exposed to that type of character. And this is the same with spirituality, the arrow of spirituality. So when we're talking about the combined lived experience with this philosophical understanding, these people become very powerful. They have a great inner power, and they radiate calmness and serenity through their adulthood. For the most part, obviously, Elizabeth R wasn't one of them. The Dalai Lama, apparently, I'll get his birth date and I'll put this on the slide. He is another example of the arrow of spirituality embodied. Now, this is where we'll talk about the children. Children that are born with this arrow, they tend to hold a very naive trust in people, and a very deep-rooted sense of natural justice and what is morally and ethically right and what isn't. So it's very important, if you're the parent of a child with the arrow of spirituality, that you not even try to be loose with the truth, okay? Because they don't respond well to being deceived. And I know it's part of being a parent where we try to protect our children and hide certain truths from them. So you will have heard the sayings lying by omission or not fully transparent. It would be about delivering truth in ways that you maintain the trust of the child, because once a child, particularly with the arrow of spirituality, determines that a parent is untrustworthy or that they've been deceptive towards them, they're going to struggle to show respect towards that parent going forward. And not only that, what's even worse is they may start to become deceptive or sneaky themselves, and this is going to lead to emotional turbulence for them. They might start to become very reactive. So the role of the parent here with these children is to guide them in spiritual matters, to allow them to learn about other religions or spiritual faith or practice and philosophies. And this is part of helping them, excuse me while I cough, this is part of helping them to understand the principles of ethics, because generally speaking, they're very perceptive, but often they lack the maturity to evaluate and express what it is they feel and think, and this can lead to frustration. So realistically, the other thing too is, if you've got a child in this modern day and time, you would be encouraging your children to relax with a book as opposed to watching a TV program that's got violence in it or doing the video games, because it's going to help them to assist that was a poor choice of words. Okay, it's going to help them to develop an awareness of their own intuition and their own extrasensory perceptions and psychic abilities. And I would go a step further and say that while these children will probably be more psychically and spiritually aware than their parents and a lot of people around them, even their peers and that, they're still going to need to be supported to manage the life challenges. And I had a bit of an inner debate as to whether or not I would share this story with you, but my children were all extremely spiritual and psychic, but they certainly were very testing and challenging at different times as well. Now, while my son didn't have the arrow of spirituality, he did have a very enhanced sense of spirit and moral justice as well. And where I'm putting this into context for you, because I see that this behaviour would be associated, this is where we're going when we talk about parents with a child with the arrow of spirituality, is while he understood and he had a moral compass and this kind of thing, he lacked human relation skills and communication skills. So where I'm going with this is, I think he was about 9, and I got called up to the school because he allegedly had bullied another child. Now, I was really shocked because I thought, that's not my child. My children don't act that way. And when I pulled him aside and I asked him, he was very honest and transparent, said yes, he had said and done the things that he'd been accused of. Well, I was flabbergasted as a parent. It was like, I don't understand, why would you do that, bullying this little boy? And it involved name calling and this kind of stuff. And he said, but mum, he said, this boy, he bullies everybody. So by drawing, it took a lot of questions before I had the full picture, and it turned out what my son was seeing was this little boy. Actually, you got to laugh in hindsight because they were kids. So him and his two mates regularly wanted to play together, but there was not a third wheel, there was a fourth wheel. And the fourth wheel was one of these that would throw a tantrum and cry if he didn't get his own way, and was always applying pressure on people. And in fact, he was a bully. But he was a little bully, as in size. He was smaller than my son. And anyway, what's happened this particular day is that my son has just decided enough is enough, and he turned around and confronted the kid, and because they were in the middle of the game and the kid started throwing a tantrum again. And so my son has just told him straight, like, stop your sniffling or whatever, stop crying, grow up or whatever. I can't remember the exact words, but either way, when I listened to my son's version of events, I thought, yeah, okay, there was better ways of handling that. I understand why you did what you did, but the end result is it's turned around on you. You're paying the price for the other child being the bully. So it was a matter of me then spending some time with my son to try and help him work on his communication, and his conflict resolution skills is where I'm going. So yeah, just because a child has got really good intuitive and even psychic abilities doesn't mean that they're always going to make wise human choices, is where I'm going with this. Now, the arrow of emotional balance, this is obviously the one we're going to look at now, is where a person's got the 2, 5, and 8 on their birth date, right? And this arrow is one that's got some real diversity of expression with it. It governs people's feelings and their capacity to express their emotions, their responses to life, and the way that we relate to the world around us. Now, they're not easily typecast, and I think that speaks for itself when we look at the two birth dates, or the people that I've got on the slide here. But typically these people do have a natural balance of their emotions, and this is combined with a spiritual understanding. They have this inherent understanding that life is a balance, and that there is this merging of spiritual and earthly life. Now, the spirit, of course, being the eternal aspect of self, and the body being a temporary state. It's impermanent. So people with this arrow, they'd be wise to seek the company of bright and happy people with the occasional pleasures of light entertainment, because the alternative is they can become over-serious, withdrawn, and with a tendency to self-isolate. I think it stands to reason. I know I've seen some negative critiques of Rishi Sunak. I'm Australian, he's not my Prime Minister. I'm not in a position to pass judgment on his political standing or whatever, but I do know from an Australian perspective, I thought his Christmas video was absolutely hilarious, and that would support this position that people with the arrow of emotional balance are really good entertainers. However, they would need to basically remind themselves on a regular basis that they're in charge of their emotions and not the other way around, because if they don't keep a handle on them, they're going to become lost or confused on their life path. Now, that might be a timely message for Rishi at the moment, because I understand that he's apparently so challenged at the moment that it's made the news, but it could be purely sensationalism, that he's throwing things around and having regular temper tantrums. Now, that would be out of character for him, and he would be really well advised to get a handle on that for any number of reasons. We all know that that just doesn't bode well for anybody for the long term, but particularly for somebody with an arrow of emotional balance, it's essential that he gets a handle on it. Okay, these people have got a natural sensitivity, and this does translate as empathy and compassion. So generally speaking, they need to make sure that they don't take on board the emotional responses of others, or the memory of the emotions held in the past. So this would be basically a person who's had a history of trauma. There would be a higher risk, I guess, of them experiencing post-traumatic disorder symptoms with the rumination. I'm stumbling over my words today. I don't know what's going on with me. Anyway, the sensitivity is actually good. It's a very positive thing, really, but it needs to be managed as with anything, okay? The sensitivity helps them to perceive another person's needs before the other person even has the time to express it verbally. Left to their own devices, if they're not the Prime Minister, I mean, Rishi's probably got other arrows. I haven't done his birth chart. But left to their own devices, they tend to make natural healers, good counsellors, and they need to make sure that they don't become dogmatic in what they do. And also to self-care. Self-care is very important. And if they do end up going into, say, the mental health or human services, they need to be very careful in as far as they are probably at higher risk of developing conditions such as vicarious trauma. I'll let you actually explore that yourself. Otherwise, the video will take too long. But vicarious trauma is a risk to anybody in these industries. And for people with the arrow of emotional balance, they're probably at even greater risk. The other, I guess, really big advice or guidance for people with this arrow is that they really need to pay attention to their feelings and their emotions, because these are a really reliable diagnostic tool for them. Although they're intuitive, their feelings are the messengers, I guess is the best way of describing it. Did I mention Rishi also has the arrow of determination? Interesting. So I'm going to try and rush through this one because I want to talk about the pyramids and do a little bit of an introduction to that before we complete this video today. So anyway, when it comes to the arrow of practicality, as you can see, it has got the number 1, 4 and 7 in the birth dates. So I've put a couple of names and their birthdays there, so you can try and make the links yourself and see whether or not it sounds reasonable to you. You can even do some research on the people involved. Now, just a reminder, an arrow is not to be read standalone when we're talking about doing a numerology report or a personal profile or analysis, okay? It's just part of the contributing potentials for a person in their life. And the reason I'm saying this is because, of course, there are some things that don't look so nice when we look at the charts. Okay, or when we look at the arrows. So people with the arrow of practicality, they tend to be the doers of the world. They're usually very clever with their hands, but they often need to have some direction about how to use their talents so that they use their talents wisely. They do like to be involved in the practicalities of life. Their primary focus is on human life, and their primary role is one where they acquire experience through involvement. Now, while some people with this arrow, they can allow their material concerns to steer the course of their life. I wonder if that would be Winston Churchill, actually. Those people with a ruling number of combined with the arrow, so we're talking about the arrow of practicality combined with a ruling number of 2, 5, 8 or 11, they will be able to rise above limitations, and they can actually become very capable artists. Now, they tend to be motivated by kindness, but they're often poor judges of character, and this makes them very vulnerable to those people, who would exploit their generosity. Now, often their path is one that at least commences, at some point in their life, potentially in the early days. They will put the focus on their material pursuits, and this might be where they fail to learn balance in the earlier part of their lives. Now, if this is the case, then they can develop a real harshness or cruelty. However, right, there's a big however with this, through the learning to develop a more balanced approach and outlook. So this is about maturity, particularly earlier in their life, then they're able to liberate themselves and acknowledge their sensitivities and to understand other people's needs. And this is where they will find their happiness, and they will become fulfilled within themselves. Right, so when we talk about pyramids, this is how I do my pyramids, and I thought I'll just give you a little view here, because this is what we're going to talk about with the next series, okay? And what it is we build a pyramid. Now, every pyramid has got 4 peaks, and the peaks are calculated and assessed based on the person's birth date and their ruling number. Now, when it comes to Princess Catherine, without going into the explanations or how or why I've reached this, the peak numbers, as in peak 1, which is where on this chart, just to help you out here a bit, peak 1 has got the number 10 in it. It's the, can you see it? Okay, so I'm just sort of trying to clarify this. Okay, peak 1 has got a number 10 in it, peak 2 has got a number 2 in it, peak 3 has got a 3 in it, and peak 4, right up the top of the biggest triangle, has got a number 3 in it as well. Now, based on Princess Catherine's birth date and her ruling number, I can tell that she has her first peak when she turned 33 in 2015, and that it was a peak of a 10, which actually translates to a 1, actually. So it was a new cycle and a new beginning for her. Now, if I'm not, surprisingly, you might be surprised by this, I actually am not an authority on the royal family. I just find, because they're public figures, that it's good to use their birth dates when I'm doing examples of numerology, and because I see family connections coming through or links with numbers and the family groups. So I find it relevant or helpful. Anyway, looking at this, I had to do a bit of a Google to see what was happening for Princess Catherine in 2015. Now, I'm not sure if you're a fan of the royal family, you might know, you might understand, or have more information. But as a new beginning goes, it looks to me that up until 2015, she was probably getting pilloried in mainstream media, and there's this real scrutiny and focus, as always, on her appearance, what she looks like, what her hair looks like, how she's growing her hair, all of this stuff. But in 2015, she had Princess Charlotte, her second child, and she actually got some really positive media reports at the end of 2015 about her appearance. I stick to the about her appearance, certainly nothing about her personality. It was all about what she looked like. Now, what we've got now, interestingly, she's in another peak year. She's aged 42, but this year for her is about decision making. And we're going to see decision making happening all through 2024 for her. Now, if you've been watching the media, we're well aware that she's receiving some health treatment and that kind of stuff. That's irrespective of the numerology. Okay, so to put this into perspective, it's going to sound a little bit harsh, okay? We're all responsible for the decisions that we make, regardless of our health status. So where I'm going with this is, she's made a choice to withdraw from the public eye as she recovers her health, and respect to her for that. I'm not saying she shouldn't do something she's not comfortable with. What I'm saying is there's consequences to every action, and this, of course, leads to a lot of speculation and unhelpful stories about her during her absence. And once she comes back to the public eye, no doubt she'll be truly scrutinised again. But I would also say, in her defence, that the decision to step back is because the media put so much attention on her appearance and her look. And obviously, with her health condition, she's not going to be looking her best, and she's certainly not going to be feeling the best. And when you're not feeling your best and you don't feel that you look your best, and you've got media writing everywhere, oh, she's looking a bit tired, oh, I can understand she'd be unwilling to put herself into that position. But anyway, where I'm going with this is there's always consequences to the choices we make, regardless of our health. And these consequences might be short term, they might be longer term, they might not. But either way, anyway, summing it up, I can tell from her numbers this year's a big year for her, whether or not it doesn't predict that she was going to have cancer this year. And I can see that her next big year, as far as peak years go, is going to be in 2033. And what we will be talking about in the next series is what is the implications of having a peak year to start with? What is the implications of the number of the peak? So we've got the peak 10, we've got the peak 2. I just explained that's about decisions, but that isn't always the case. Okay, there are variations to this as well, and I will explain to you how it works. And what is the implications of having a 3? And then how is it, this is the stuff that I'll explain to you, how is it that I was able to establish her first peak was in 2015 and her second one was 2024? There you go. But I will run all of that through in the next series. So, my friends, I'm going to close this off because obviously, as usual, I've waffled way too much. And of course, I want to try and keep these videos less than half an hour. So I'm going to say, if you've stuck with it this far, well done, go you. Thank you very much for being part of the journey. Thank you for being interested. Please do leave a comment if you've got any questions, and hopefully you're interested enough to check out the pyramids next week. So for now, though, I'm going to say love you, leave you, thank you, take care, have a blessed day, blessed week. See you on the next one. Bye-bye for now.